The Laughing Station. Far above a dying blue planet, the Zereth Prime Station floated like a giant metal moon. It was home to thousands of alien scientists, soldiers, and engineers. They were proud, intelligent, and advanced. And among them worked one single human, Ethan Cole, a janitor. Every day, Ethan walked the long silver halls, pushing his cleaning drone and toolbox. His uniform was gray, his face always calm. He didn't speak much, and when he did, no one listened. To the aliens, he was just the human cleaner, a joke among the mighty Zereth. The aliens laughed when he passed. "Careful, the primitive is coming," one engineer said with a smirk. Another chuckled, "Don't give him anything too complex, he might break it." Ethan only smiled softly and kept walking. He knew what they thought of humans, weak, emotional, and simple-minded. But he also knew something they didn't. He understood machines in ways they never could. The station's core room was the heart of Zereth Prime. It was massive, filled with glowing pipes and humming reactors. The aliens called it the core of eternity because it powered the entire city above and the planet below. But lately something was wrong. Lights flickered. The engines groaned. Systems failed one by one. The alien engineers worked day and night, scanning data and arguing loudly in their strange musical language. Yet nothing worked. Ethan cleaned the floor near the control deck as they argued. He watched quietly while they made the same mistakes again and again. The power grid wasn't just failing, it was dying. He could see it in the way the light pulsed unevenly through the cables. He wanted to help. His fingers itched to touch the circuit panels, but every time he tried to speak, the aliens waved him off. "Not now, human. Stay out of this. Go clean something." He swallowed his words and stepped back. He wasn't angry, just sad. Later that evening, the engineers finally gave up and left the room. The station went into low power mode. Dim blue light filled the corridors, and silence wrapped around the place like a blanket. Ethan stayed behind. He looked at the giant reactor, a web of wires, pipes, and energy flows. His eyes scanned every line, every joint. He saw what the aliens missed, a design flaw buried deep in their system. Something so small yet so dangerous it could destroy everything within hours. He took a slow breath and whispered to himself, "All right, let's fix this." He opened his small toolkit. It wasn't advanced, just human-made wrenches, clamps, and circuit gel. But Ethan's hands moved like an artist. He worked quietly, following instinct more than schematics. He rerouted power lines, replaced corroded wires, and adjusted the crystal regulators that powered the alien energy cells. The hum of the core changed. The lights grew steady. For the first time in months, the reactor was breathing smoothly again. But then, bang! A surge of blue light burst from the floor. Ethan was thrown across the room. His head hit the wall and sparks flew all around him. The alarms screamed. Doors slammed open, and alien guards rushed in with weapons raised. "There, the human. He broke the core." One shouted, "No." Ethan tried to speak, coughing through smoke. "I fixed it." But before he could finish, the guard stunned him. His world turned black. When he woke up, Ethan was in a cold metal cell. His wrists were bound with glowing cuffs. Outside the force field door, two alien officers argued. "He was touching the core," said one. "He must have sabotaged it," said another. "But the power levels are stable again," a third voice said, confused. "Everything's working better than before." Still, no one believed him. To them, a human couldn't possibly fix what their smartest engineers couldn't understand. It was easier to believe he got lucky, or cheated. Ethan leaned back against the wall, exhausted. His hands were burned, his clothes covered in black dust. Yet in his tired eyes there was a small spark of pride. The station was alive. The lights outside his cell glowed evenly, proof that he'd done it right. Hours passed. Somewhere deep inside the walls he heard laughter again, the same mocking tone that filled every corridor. But this time the laugh sounded nervous, uneasy, because everyone knew the truth. Even if they didn't want to say it aloud, the human janitor had done something impossible. As Ethan closed his eyes, he whispered into the quiet, "I told you. I can fix this." Outside his cell, the stars shone brighter. The repaired core sent new energy pulsing through Zereth Prime Station. But with it came something else, a question that none of the aliens could answer. If a mere human could fix what the greatest minds of Zerath could not, what else might he be capable of? The failure. No one noticed. The next morning, Zerath Prime Station was buzzing with confusion. The lights were steady, the air felt warmer, and all systems were back online. It was as if the station had been reborn overnight. Every alien officer, technician, and commander gathered in the control deck, staring at the glowing power charts. The readings were perfect, something no one had seen in months. But instead of celebrating, they argued. "This makes no sense," said Commander Vrek, his golden skin reflecting the monitors. The human was inside the core room when the system restarted. "It must be a coincidence, or sabotage," replied another. "Maybe he caused the failure to make himself look useful." They all nodded. None of them wanted to believe that a janitor had done what their top engineers couldn't. It would shake everything they believed about superiority and intelligence. Meanwhile, Ethan sat quietly in his small metal cell. His wrists ached from the glowing cuffs. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, but he didn't complain. He just watched the flickering shadows on the wall, waiting. He knew how they thought. To them, he was an accident, a mistake in their perfect world. But inside, he felt calm, because he knew the truth. The power grid was working because of him. He had fixed it using something no alien engineer ever considered: human instinct. The door hissed open. A young alien entered. She was smaller than the others, with light silver skin and bright violet eyes. Her name was Lyra. She wore a scientist's uniform and carried a small data tablet. "Human," she said softly, stepping closer. "Did you touch the core's lower grid?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, it was overloaded. I rerouted the energy through the stabilizers." Lyra frowned. "That's impossible." "The stabilizers were inactive for years. We disconnected them." "Yeah," Ethan said with a small smile. "That's why it worked." She blinked, confused. "Explain." Ethan pointed to the glowing screen she carried. "Your system had feedback loops. The energy was chasing itself. I gave it a new path. Simple." Lyra stared at him, trying to understand. "You saw that? Without scanning equipment?" "Didn't need to," he said, leaning back. "I could hear the hum. The frequency told me what was wrong." Lyra's eyes widened. She had studied for decades, yet never thought to listen to the machines. To her, they were tools of logic. To him, they were living systems that spoke in sound, rhythm, and vibration. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then quietly, she whispered, "Maybe we were wrong about you." Outside the cell, alarms suddenly began to flash again. The ground shook slightly. Voices echoed through the hall, the engineers shouting in panic. Lyra turned sharply and opened a holographic screen on her tablet. The readings showed new energy spikes deep within the planet below. The core of Zerath, their world's heart reactor, was destabilizing. "Oh no," Lyra whispered. "The repair didn't reach the lower layers. The planet's reactor is failing." Ethan stood. "Show me." She hesitated, then turned the tablet toward him. He studied the data quickly, his eyes narrowing. "You're losing heat balance. If the core collapses, the planet will tear itself apart." Lyra's hands trembled. "Our engineers will fix it." Ethan shook his head. "No, they'll make it worse. The system's too old. It needs a total rebuild." The lights flickered again. A low rumble echoed from beneath the station, the planet's distant heartbeat turning into a warning growl. Lyra looked at him, her pride fighting her fear. Finally, she whispered, "Then what do we do?" Ethan smiled faintly. "You let the janitor take a look." Minutes later, Lyra walked through the engineering hall with Ethan following behind her. Other aliens stared in shock. "Why is the human out of his cell?" One shouted. "He's dangerous." Another protested, but Lyra ignored them. "He's the only one who understands what's happening." She snapped. Her voice, though soft, carried strength. Ethan stepped toward the main reactor display. The readings danced in violent red. He traced the energy flow with his finger. "There's your problem," he said. "You built your entire system on symmetry. That's pretty, but unstable. You need balance, not perfection. Balance." One engineer scoffed. "What does that even mean?" Ethan didn't answer. He simply grabbed a wrench from his belt, one of his old Earth tools, and began adjusting the pressure lines manually. The aliens gasped. "You can't touch that. It's dangerous." "Everything's dangerous when you don't understand it," he said calmly. He twisted one valve, then another. The lights dimmed, then brightened. The red alarms faded to orange. For a brief moment, hope flickered across the engineers' faces. Then suddenly the ground shook violently. A loud boom echoed through the deck. The energy levels spiked again, higher than before. Lyra shouted, "Ethan, stop! It's overloading!" Ethan didn't move. His eyes followed the hum. He pressed his ear against a pipe and whispered, "No, it's not the core. It's something deeper, something alive." The room went silent. "What do you mean alive?" Lyra asked. Ethan looked up, his face pale under the blue lights. "Your planet's heart isn't just a machine. It's part organic. It's reacting to the energy changes. It's dying." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the hum of the machines seemed to fade. Lyra stared at him, realizing he was right. The alien engineers had always treated their world's reactor like a simple engine, but Ethan saw it differently, like a living being in pain. As the lights flickered once more, Ethan looked at the glowing globe of Zerath below through the window. "You've been feeding it energy for centuries," he murmured. "Now it's starving for balance." Lyra turned to the council communicator. "We need to shut down the grid," she said. But before she could act, Commander Rex's voice roared through the speakers. "No one shuts down anything without my order. And the human goes back to his cell, now." Guards entered the room with weapons drawn. Ethan looked at Lyra, calm but serious. "You're running out of time." The floor trembled again. A deep, echoing crack came from beneath their feet. Lyra's hand shook as she whispered, "He's right." But the guards didn't care. They grabbed Ethan and dragged him away once more. As he was pulled through the hallway, he turned his head toward Lyra and said softly, "Tell them the system's alive. And when it screams, it won't stop." The human equation. The metal cell was cold and silent again. Ethan sat on the floor with his back against the wall, staring at the dim blue light above his head. The rumbling of the station had grown stronger since morning. He could feel it through the metal floor, like a giant heartbeat under his feet, getting weaker with every passing hour. He had warned them. He had told them the truth, but no one believed the human janitor. Outside his cell, guards paced the hallway with heavy boots. Every few minutes the lights flickered. Sometimes the floor vibrated enough to rattle the door. Something deep within the planet below was breaking apart, and no one wanted to admit it. Ethan leaned his head back and whispered to himself, "They don't listen until it's too late." On the other side of the station, Lyra stood before a large holographic display showing the planet's core activity. She had spent hours running simulations, comparing the old readings with Ethan's words. Each time the results were the same. His explanation made perfect sense. Her mentor, Chief Engineer Solvek, entered the lab. His golden eyes narrowed when he saw her charts. "You're wasting time on human nonsense again." "It's not nonsense," Lyra said firmly. The human was right. The core isn't just mechanical. It's alive, or something close to it. It reacts like a living organism under pressure. Solvek slammed his metallic hand on the console. "Enough. You let that creature fill your head with stories. Humans are primitive, emotional, and illogical." Lyra didn't argue. She simply pointed to the data, then explained this. The readings showed waves of energy pulsing through the planet's crust, like breathing. Then a flatline dip, a sign of collapse. Solvek's confident expression cracked for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Coincidence," he muttered. "Keep your theories to yourself." He left the room without another word. Lyra stood alone, watching the screen as the pulse slowed again. She clenched her fists. The aliens were too proud to see what was right in front of them. She made a decision. Lyra walked quickly through the dim corridors, ignoring the alarms and warning signs flashing on the walls. When she reached the detention wing, 2 guards blocked her path. "You can't go in," one said. "I have authorization," she lied, holding up her data tablet. The guards hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, Ethan looked up as she entered. "Back again?" he asked quietly. Lyra knelt beside him, lowering her voice. "You were right. The core is reacting. It's getting worse, but they won't believe me." Ethan smiled faintly. "They don't have to. Just show them what happens next." "What do you mean?" He looked her straight in the eyes. If the planet's alive, then it's trying to protect itself. When it can't hold the pressure anymore, it'll release it. And when that happens, your world will explode. Lyra's face turned pale. Can we stop it? Maybe, Ethan said, but not with orders from your commanders. We'll have to do it ourselves. Moments later, Lyra used her access card to disable the force field. Ethan stepped out of the cell, stretching his stiff arms. You know, he said with a half smile, you could get in a lot of trouble for this. Lyra smiled back nervously. If we don't fix this, there won't be anyone left to punish me. They moved quickly through the service corridors toward the lower decks, where the station's emergency reactors were housed. As they walked, Ethan looked around at the alien tech, shiny, complex, almost too perfect. That's your problem, he said softly. You build things that look flawless, but they don't bend. When they break, they shatter. And humans build things that bend? Lyra asked curiously. Ethan nodded. We build things that survive mistakes. It's not about perfection. It's about adaptation. Lyra thought about that in silence as they reached the access hatch. The door opened to reveal a long tunnel glowing with red light. Steam hissed from the walls, and the ground trembled beneath them. The sound of the planet's core was louder now, a deep, rhythmic pulse, almost like breathing. Ethan knelt beside a control panel and began connecting cables. This system controls the stabilizer lines, he said. If we redirect the flow, we might buy some time. Lyra helped him, reading the alien codes out loud. He worked fast, improvising as he went. You're not following the manual, she said. Manuals are for when you already understand something, Ethan replied. This is different. He twisted a valve and sparks flew. Lyra jumped back, startled. Sorry, Ethan said calmly. She's fighting back. She? The planet, he said simply. She doesn't trust us yet. Lyra looked at him strangely but said nothing. Suddenly the tunnel shook violently. A loud roar echoed from below, and a crack split open in the floor, spilling blue light. Lyra stumbled, but Ethan grabbed her arm, pulling her to safety. What was that? She cried. The core's outer shell just ruptured, Ethan said. We're running out of time. He pulled out a small metallic disc from his pocket, something human-made. This is a pulse regulator, old Earth tech. It can absorb feedback if we connect it right. Lyra blinked in surprise. You still carry human tools? Ethan smiled faintly. Never leave home without them. He placed the disc onto the energy conduit. It glowed, humming softly. The tremors slowed for a moment. The core's heartbeat steadied. Lyra exhaled in relief. You did it. Not yet, Ethan said quietly. This will only last a few hours. She frowned. Then what happens? He looked toward the massive window where the planet glowed like a wounded star. Then we rebuild it. For real this time. Back in the command center, alarms continued to flash. Commander Rek demanded updates, but the engineers had no answers. The readings stabilized suddenly, confusing everyone. Rek gritted his teeth. What changed? An officer looked up from his console. I don't know, sir, but there's a new energy signal coming from the lower decks. Rek narrowed his eyes. Who's down there? The officer hesitated. Lyra, and the human. The commander's fists clenched. Find them, now. Deep below, Ethan and Lyra stood side by side, their faces lit by the pulsing glow of the planet's heart. For the first time, the alien and the human worked together. Not as servant and master, but as equals trying to save a dying world. And somewhere, far below the metal floors and glowing pipes, the planet seemed to listen. Its pulse grew calmer, as if it finally understood that one small human truly wanted to help. The collapse begins. The stars outside Zerath Prime Station glowed faintly against the endless black of space. From a distance, the station looked peaceful, a shining ring around a glowing planet. But inside, everything was falling apart. Deep within the metal walls, the planet's heartbeat had changed again. What had been a slow rhythm was now a thunderous roar. Tremors shook the station every few minutes. Panels cracked, Alarms screamed, and frightened voices echoed through the corridors. The collapse had begun. In the lower maintenance tunnels, Ethan and Lyra stood over a cluster of energy conduits that pulsed with blue light. Sparks jumped between the cables. The air was hot, thick with smoke and pressure. "It's getting worse," Lyra said, scanning the readings on her tablet. "The core's energy is doubling every hour. Soon it'll reach critical mass." Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. "She's in pain," he murmured. "Who?" Lyra asked. "The planet," he said. "She's trying to heal herself, but your systems keep forcing her to stay awake. You've been draining her for too long." Lyra looked confused, but deep inside she knew he was right. The Zerath had always taken what they needed, power, resources, life, without ever giving anything back. Up in the command center, Commander Rex stood before a massive screen showing the planet's surface breaking apart. Red cracks spread like lightning across the continents. Massive energy storms rose from the ground, tearing through the atmosphere. "Evacuation protocols are now active," one officer said. "Transports are preparing to leave orbit." Vrek slammed his fist on the console. "No one leaves until the station's archives are secured. We will not abandon Zerath technology." "But, sir," another officer protested, "the planet will explode within hours." "I said no one leaves," Vrek roared. The officers obeyed in silence. Fear filled the air, thicker than the smoke rising from the burning control boards. Meanwhile, far below, Ethan knelt beside a cracked panel. His hands worked quickly, tightening wires, rerouting power manually. Lyra handed him tools, her eyes wide with worry. "Can we still save it?" she asked. "Maybe," Ethan said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "But not from here. We need to reach the planetary core nexus, the main heart of your system. That's where everything begins and ends." Lyra froze. "That's miles underground. The heat alone could melt steel." Ethan gave her a small smile. "Then we better move fast before it melts us." They climbed through tunnels and ladders, deeper into the maintenance levels. Steam burst from pipes, lights flickered red, and debris rained from the ceiling. The further they went, the louder the hum became. A deep, powerful vibration that felt alive. At one point, the floor beneath them cracked. Lyra slipped, crying out as she nearly fell into a glowing pit of energy. Ethan grabbed her wrist and pulled her back up with all his strength. She stared at him, shaking. "Why are you helping us?" she whispered. "We treated you like dirt. You could have left us to die." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. His voice was quiet when he replied, "Because someone has to clean up the mess." Lyra blinked, and for the first time, she smiled in the middle of chaos. When they reached the Nexus gate, 2 armed guards blocked the entrance. Their glowing weapons aimed straight at Ethan. "Step back, human," one said coldly. "You're not allowed here." Lyra stepped forward. "He's the only one who can fix this." The guards didn't move. "Orders are orders. Commander Vrek wants the human contained." Ethan sighed. "I don't have time for this." He grabbed a loose cable from the wall and jammed it into the floor grid. Electricity sparked violently, and the lights went out for 2 seconds. When they flickered back on, both guards were unconscious. Lyra stared at him, shocked. "Was that safe?" He grinned faintly. "Nope. But it worked." The Nexus chamber was enormous, a cathedral of energy and light. Giant pillars pulsed with blue fire, and at the center floated a glowing orb the size of a small moon. The planetary core. Ethan walked toward it slowly. "Beautiful," he whispered. "It's dying," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "If it collapses, everything will go with it." Ethan nodded. "Then we rebuild it from the inside." He began, setting up his tools, both human and alien, connecting them to the control ports around the orb. The lights dimmed, and the hum grew softer, as if the planet was listening to him. Lyra watched, fascinated. "You talk to it, like it can hear you." Ethan smiled. "It can. Machines don't speak words, but they tell you what they need if you pay attention." Up above, in the command center, alarms reached maximum level. "Sir, massive energy surge from the Nexus." Commander Rex's eyes widened. "Who authorized access?" The officer swallowed hard. "Dr. Lyra, and the human." Rex's face twisted in rage. "Seal the Nexus! Cut their power!" But before anyone could act, the screens turned white. A massive wave of energy shot from the planet's surface, racing across the station like a living pulse. The tremors stopped. The alarms fell silent. For a few seconds, everything was calm, too calm. Then, the outer hull began to crack. Inside the Nexus, Ethan's eyes widened as energy surged through the cables. "It's not stabilizing," he shouted. "She's rejecting the system." Lyra typed commands rapidly, her hands trembling. "What do we do?" Ethan's voice was steady. "We need to shut it down manually, from inside the core." Lyra froze. "That's suicide." "Maybe," he said. "But someone has to do it." She grabbed his arm. "No, you'll die." Ethan looked at her gently. "You said your people never believed humans could do anything great. Maybe it's time I prove them wrong." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to." But Ethan smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Keep the systems open. If this works, you'll have your world back." Then, without another word, he stepped into the glowing light. The energy swallowed him whole, and for a moment, everything went silent again. Then the core exploded with radiant light. Not of destruction, but of renewal. Blue turned to gold, red to white. The tremors stopped. The station steadied, and far below, the dying planet began to breathe again. Blueprints of hope. The explosion of light faded slowly, leaving behind a silence that felt sacred. The once roaring energy of Zereth Prime's core now glowed with a calm, golden pulse. Steam rose in gentle clouds, and the endless trembling of the station finally stopped. Lyra stood frozen near the control deck, her hands trembling. The bright light had forced her to cover her eyes, but now she stared at the empty space where Ethan Cole had stood just moments before. The human janitor, the one they all laughed at, was gone. The hum of the core softened into a peaceful rhythm. The readings on Lyra's tablet slowly shifted from red to green, stabilized, balanced, alive. He had done it. The upper levels of the station were in chaos. Alarms had fallen silent, but confusion reigned. Commanders shouted orders, med drones carried the injured, and frightened citizens crowded the hallways. When the emergency lights finally dimmed, the broadcast system came alive with Lyra's voice. "This is Dr. Lyra," she said, her tone clear but heavy with emotion. "The core has been stabilized. The planet is safe for now. But we must all understand how it was saved." The aliens listening across the station went quiet. "It wasn't by our machines," she continued. "It wasn't by our leaders. It was by a human, Ethan Cole, the janitor you all mocked. He saw life where we saw only metal. He listened when we refused to, and he gave everything to save our world." Her words echoed through every speaker, every corridor. Some aliens bowed their heads. Others simply stared, unable to believe it. Hours later, Lyra stood alone in the Nexus chamber. The golden core pulsed gently before her, like a giant, living heart. She touched the edge of the glass barrier, whispering softly, "You're breathing again, aren't you?" The hum grew slightly louder, as if responding. She smiled through her tears. "I think he'd be happy about that," she said, but even as peace returned, part of her felt empty. Ethan was gone, lost somewhere within the light. Yet his presence lingered in every echo, every pulse of energy. Then she noticed something strange. On the floor, near the control console, lay a small object, a silver data chip, burned around the edges but still intact. She picked it up carefully. It had Ethan's name carved into it. Her heart skipped. "You left something for me." In the following days, Lyra worked tirelessly to decode the chip. When she finally accessed it, a holographic message appeared. Ethan's voice filled the room, calm, warm, familiar. "Hey, Lyra. If you're watching this, I guess I didn't make it out," he said with a faint chuckle. "But that's okay. I did what I came to do." She covered her mouth, trying not to cry. "I left you something," he continued. "Inside this chip are new designs, human designs, machines that bend instead of break, systems that adapt like living things. You can build them better, safer, maybe even beautiful." He paused for a moment, his voice softer. "Don't build for power, build for balance. That's what your planet wanted. That's what all worlds want." The hologram flickered slightly, then ended with a final line. "Take care of her, and tell them the janitor did his job." For a long moment, Lyra sat in silence. Then she wiped her eyes and began to study the data. The chip contained detailed plans, hybrid blueprints combining human creativity with alien precision. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. She called a meeting of the Zarath Engineering Council, the same leaders who once mocked Ethan. They gathered in the grand chamber, murmuring among themselves until Lyra stepped onto the platform. She placed Ethan's chip on the table and activated the holographic blueprints. Glowing designs filled the air, floating cities, self-healing, structures, energy systems that recycled power instead of consuming it. "This," Lyra said proudly, "is the work of the man you called primitive. These are his blueprints. He called them blueprints of hope." The council members stared in awe. Some looked ashamed. Others whispered quietly, realizing what they had lost. Lyra continued, "He showed us what true intelligence looks like, not in control, but in understanding. Not in pride, but in compassion. We have the knowledge now. Let's use it right." Weeks turned into months. Under Lyra's direction, Zarath Prime began to rebuild. The alien cities were no longer sharp and mechanical. They grew softer, more natural, shaped like living organisms. Towers swayed gently with energy currents instead of resisting them. Lights glowed in harmony with the planet's rhythm. The Zarath people worked side by side with the few remaining humans on the station, sharing tools and ideas. The barriers of arrogance and species melted away. Everywhere she went, Lyra heard whispers about Ethan, the human janitor who saved a world. Statues of him began appearing across the new cities. Some showed him holding a wrench. Others depicted him kneeling beside the glowing core, hand outstretched. But Lyra knew he wouldn't have wanted statues. He would have wanted progress. One evening, as she stood beneath the shining towers of the rebuilt station, she looked up at the night sky. The planet below shimmered with green forests again. Rivers sparkled like veins of silver. Life was returning. A soft breeze passed, carrying the hum of the power grid, a gentle, steady rhythm. It almost sounded like a heartbeat. Lyra closed her eyes and smiled. "You did it, Ethan," she whispered. "You really rebuilt our world." Suddenly her communicator beeped. A signal, weak, static-filled, coming from deep within the core. Her eyes widened. She ran to the control center and opened the transmission channel. The voice was faint but unmistakable. "Lyra, you're still making a mess down there." Tears rolled down her face as she laughed. "Ethan, you're alive?" The signal flickered. "Maybe not exactly. But let's just say I'm part of the system now. Keep the planet alive for me, will you?" Then the signal faded, leaving behind a soft, rhythmic hum. Lyra looked at the glowing screen and whispered, "Always." The camera of imagination pans out, showing the reborn world below, the shining station above, and the endless stars beyond. The janitor who was once mocked had become legend. His tools had become symbols of hope, and his legacy lived on in every hum, every light, every life that beat across the stars. The man who rebuilt a world. The world below Zerath Prime Station was alive again. From the once broken crust of the planet, rivers of light now flowed like veins under its surface. Great green forests shimmered in dawn's glow, and the winds that once screamed with ash now carried the soft whisper of renewal. But for Lyra, the silence inside her heart had not faded. It had been 3 months since the signal. Ethan's faint voice carried through static and energy. Since then, she hadn't heard him again. Some said it was only a glitch in the system. Others believed his consciousness had merged with the planet itself. Lyra didn't care what the council believed. Deep inside, she knew. He was still out there, somewhere within the pulse of the world he had rebuilt. She stood now inside the core sanctuary, the room that once nearly destroyed them all. It looked different. Where sharp metal once stood, smooth crystalline vines now grew from the walls, glowing with golden energy. The air was warm, alive. "System status," she said softly. A calm, familiar male voice replied through the console speakers. "Planetary balance stable. Energy flow within safe range. Temperature optimal." Lyra froze. The tone was not robotic. It carried rhythm, warmth, something almost human. "Run identity check," she whispered. "Identity, Ethan Cole. Human origin, status, undefined." Her heart skipped. "Ethan?" There was a pause. Then the voice chuckled quietly, a sound that filled her chest with both joy and tears. "You're still running diagnostics before saying hello?" Lyra covered her mouth, laughing and crying all at once. You're alive." "Not exactly," the voice said gently. "Let's just say the planet and I had a long talk. She didn't want to let me go." Lyra looked around the glowing chamber, realizing what had happened. When Ethan entered the core, his body had vanished, but his consciousness, his mind, had fused with the living energy that powered the world. He was the core now. "You're part of the system," she said softly. "You became it." "Looks that way," Ethan replied. "Guess the janitor got promoted to planetary maintenance." Lyra laughed through tears. "You always find a way to joke even after saving the galaxy." "It's part of the job," he said warmly. "Someone has to keep the lights on." Over the following weeks, Lyra and Ethan worked together again, though now through the console and the network of energy that spread across the world. She would speak to him through the system. He would respond through vibrations, lights, and sounds. Under their combined care, the planet continued to thrive. Ethan guided her to use his hybrid designs, helping the Zerath rebuild their cities, not above the world, but with it. Towers grew like trees, powered by roots of energy instead of metal cables. Homes were built around living crystals that glowed in the dark, absorbing light from the core. The Zerath finally understood what Ethan had meant. Machines should serve life, not consume it. The people changed. Their arrogance faded. They began to honor the planet as a living partner, not a resource. Statues of Ethan stood in every new city, but Lyra knew he would have hated that. He never cared about statues or fame. He only cared that things worked, that they lasted. One evening, Lyra returned to the sanctuary and sat before the glowing console. "You've been quiet today," she said softly. "Just listening," Ethan replied. His voice echoed gently through the chamber. You can hear them now. The hums, the wind, the pulse of the planet. It's like music. Lyra smiled. You made that music, Ethan. You and this world are one now. He chuckled. Not bad for a janitor, huh? Her expression softened. Not bad for a hero. Nah, he said, his tone humble. Heroes save people. I just fixed a mess. Same thing I've always done. Lyra leaned closer to the console, her voice tender. But this time, you fixed everything. Suddenly, alarms flickered faintly across the upper console. Not danger alarms, but new signals. What's that? She asked. Visitors, Ethan said calmly. Small fleet entering orbit. Non-Zereth ships. Humans. Yeah, from Earth. Looks like they finally figured out where their missing janitor went. Lyra smiled. You should talk to them. Maybe you should, he replied. They'll listen to you better, Ethan, she said softly. You deserve to be remembered. They need to know what you did. They will, he said, his voice fading into the hum of the core. Every time they look up at this planet, every time they feel its light. They'll know, Lyra's eyes shimmered. What about you? Don't you want to rest? Can't, Ethan said with a gentle laugh. The world still needs cleaning. Always something leaking, always something broken, she smiled, wiping her tears. You'll never stop, will you? Nope, he said softly. It's what I do. When the human ships landed days later, the Zerath welcomed them, not as rivals but as allies. The two species worked side by side, sharing knowledge and rebuilding a new future. At the center of every design, every invention, every power grid, one message was written in two languages, human and Zerath alike. For Ethan Cole, the man who rebuilt a world. Years passed. Lyra became the chief architect of the new Zerath alliance. She grew older, wiser, and kinder, just as Ethan had once been. And every evening, she returned to the sanctuary to talk to him. Sometimes his voice was faint. Sometimes it came as a gentle vibration in the walls, but it was always there. One night, she sat quietly and whispered, You still awake, old friend? The core pulsed softly in response. Always. Someone has to keep an eye on things. Lyra smiled. You've done enough, Ethan. Maybe, but as long as she's breathing, I'll stay. The chamber filled with a warm golden glow, surrounding her like sunlight. Lyra closed her eyes, feeling peace for the first time in years. Outside, the planet shined brighter than ever. A living world reborn from the heart of a single human's courage and compassion. And across the stars, travelers would one day tell the story of the janitor who listened to machines, who rebuilt a dying world, and who became part of it forever. Legacy of the janitor. Centuries passed. The stars changed their patterns in the sky, but the golden planet of Zerath Prime still glowed like a beacon in the dark sea of space. Travelers from countless worlds came to see it, not for its riches, not for conquest, but to witness the miracle of a world that lived. They called it the planet that breathes, and at the center of its light, deep within the core sanctuary, the spirit of one human still pulsed quietly. Ethan Cole. The janitor who rebuilt a world. The cities of Zerath had become living wonders. Towers grew like trees, made from a blend of crystal and biometal. Streets shimmered with energy drawn from the core, and bridges curved like vines above glowing rivers. Everywhere, the people lived in harmony with the planet, drawing only what they needed, returning what they could, and high above them, orbiting like a silent guardian, the old Zerath Prime station still floated, now transformed into the Hall of Light, a monument to unity and remembrance. Inside that great hall, a single statue stood in the center. It was not made of gold or stone, but of pure, translucent crystal. Within it, a faint light pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Beneath the statue, the words were carved in both human and Zerath script. He listened when no one else did. Generations of children, human and alien alike, came to touch the base of the statue. Teachers told them stories of the man who was mocked, who was forgotten, but who saved everything. One young student, a human boy named Taran, looked up at the glowing figure one day and asked, "Why did he do it?" If everyone was so cruel to him, why help them? The teacher smiled. Because that's what real strength is, Terran, not revenge, not pride, just doing what's right, even when no one believes in you. The boy stared at the light for a long time and whispered, I want to be like him. Down on the planet, Lyra's legacy lived on too. Though centuries had passed, her writings and journals were still studied by engineers, scientists, and philosophers. She had chronicled every moment she shared with Ethan, every lesson, every word of wisdom. One passage was quoted more than any other. He taught me that perfection is not the goal. Life is meant to grow, to make mistakes, to rebuild. That's what makes us alive. Her final entry ended with a simple sentence. He never stopped fixing things. Not the machines. Not the people, not even me. Far beneath the surface, the core sanctuary remained unchanged. The same warm light filled its walls. The same soft hum vibrated through the air. Over time, the world's caretakers had learned how to speak with the consciousness within, the one who had become part of the core. His voice was quieter now, older perhaps, like the voice of a wind moving through the trees, but it still carried kindness. When engineers came to monitor the systems, they often heard him. Be gentle with her, he'd say. She's done a lot for you. Don't rush the repairs. Listen to the hum first. They followed his advice without question. They called him the Guardian. Only the elders knew his true name. One evening, a group of explorers from another galaxy arrived on Zerath. They came seeking the Guardian, curious about the ancient story of a man who had become one with a planet. They were brought to the core sanctuary. When they entered the glowing chamber, they stood in awe at its beauty. This world feels alive, one of them whispered. A caretaker smiled. Because it is. They approached the console. The hum grew stronger, almost welcoming. Then through the speakers a faint voice echoed. Visitors, huh? Just don't track dirt on the floor. The explorers looked at each other, shocked. The caretaker only laughed softly. He still doesn't like messes. Far above, in the Hall of Light, the golden statue began to glow brighter. It was said that every 100 years, when the planet reached perfect harmony, the core's energy pulsed in rhythm with the stars, and that was when his spirit awakened the most. That night, the whole sky shimmered. The forests glowed with blue veins of light, and rivers sparkled like starlight reflected on glass. Across every city, people stopped and looked up. They heard it. A faint whisper carried by the wind. Keep it clean, and keep it kind. It was gentle, familiar, human. The people smiled, tears in their eyes, knowing exactly who it was. Centuries turned into millennia. New species came and went. The galaxy expanded, civilizations rose and fell. Yet the story of Ethan Cole never faded. It became more than a legend. It became a lesson. Starship captains kept small plaques of him on their bridges for luck. Mechanics hung tiny wrenches on their belts, calling them Cole's tools. And scientists studying alien ecosystems often quoted his words, "Every world has a voice. You just have to stop talking long enough to hear it." In the distant future, a young woman stood before the Hall of Light, staring up at the glowing statue. She was a mechanic from a small colony. Grease on her hands, a curious light in her eyes. She placed a small metal tool at the base of the statue. "Thanks for showing us what it means to fix things," she whispered. As she turned to leave, the faintest glimmer of light pulsed through the statue. One soft heartbeat. The girl stopped and smiled. "You're still watching, aren't you?" And somewhere, in the vast hum of the living planet, a quiet laugh echoed, warm and distant, like the memory of a friend. In the end, he was no emperor, no warrior, no chosen savior. He was just a human janitor, a man who saw beauty in broken things. And because he believed that even the smallest person could make a difference, he rebuilt an entire world.